Alright, first things first, since we're trying to save money, I want to suggest something like this here. This brand is called Power Sport. $307 for this full set. Front and rear rotors, front and rear pads, and 2 wear sensors. That's less than half the cost of OEM equipment, and they work just fine. Kind of look cool in black. It'll scrape off immediately. That's okay. It's a low dust. I've used them for a while without any problems. Little added bonus with it being drilled and slotted. Next, you'll want to get yourself a set of these rubber jack pads. Mercedes has these little wells to act as lift points, and you're going to want to use these adapters onto your jacks or on your lifts to bring the car up. Another thing that Mercedes does, they don't have lug nuts. They have lug bolts. Makes it easy for the tire to come off. Just you want to be careful that once you get all of them off, there are no studs for that wheel to hold on to. So the whole wheel might just kind of fall forward. Make sure that doesn't happen. Once the wheel is off, the first thing I like to do is spray the center of this hub here with some PB Blast or some kind of penetrating oil, just to start to get it loosened up in case it's rusted on there. Also, there's a little Torx screw here we're going to take off, so you can spray some penetrating oil in there as well. In the back here, you see this line that's going to go to the wear sensor. Just pull off the cap from the bleed screw and just kind of move that to the side a little bit. That'll give you a little bit of access to these caps that are back here, and that's just to weather seal where the pins are for the caliper. Pull both of those off, and then we're going to use a 9mm hex head, like an Allen key, if you will, to pull those pins out off of this caliper bracket. Once we do that, we'll take the bracket off. Go ahead and set the pins to the side and carefully remove this caliper off of the rotor. One thing to notice, if your brake pads have dug into your rotor, you might develop like a little lip here, a little groove, and that might make it hard to pull the caliper off. So if that's the case, take a screwdriver, stick it in there, and just pry it to the side. You'll end up compressing the pistons a little bit, just enough to make it easy to come off. With that, remember that since we're going to be compressing pistons to change brake pads, it's a good idea to pull the cap off of your reservoir just to make it easier. Before the caliper comes off, you'll need to remove this retaining clip. Pretty simple. Screwdriver goes in, pry it off, keep it to the side. We'll need that when reassembling. Next, we're going to just pull this caliper off. Remember that you never want to let calipers hang by their hoses. We'll put strain on here and we could do some damage. So I'm just going to use this giant zip tie to hold up the caliper. Once that's in place, we can start working on these pads here and compressing these pistons. First thing we'll do is we'll take off this one pad. It should pop off quite easily. Then we're going to use this tool to help compress the pistons. You could use a C-clamp. Old school is a big giant C-clamp, but they've got tools to make things easier now. They even have one with like a pistol grip, works faster than this here. Before we do that, let's take this wear sensor and unplug it. Once you've got those pistons all the way in, just unsnap this pad. There's little clips that hold them in to the pistons, which is pretty cool. Just unsnap them. Next, quick once over with some compressed air if you have it, just to clean up things in here. Hopefully that penetrating oil has had some time to seep in. Next, we're going to take this Torx screw out. It's a Torx 30. Use caution not to strip this out. I like to try to do it by hand first, at least to get it to crack it. Blow it out in case there's any grime in there, because you want that to fully seat. Once you free it up, if you've got an air ratchet, you can use that to get it off. After that, set that to the side. After that, you're going to go around back. 2 bolts that hold the caliper on, just like any other car. 21mm socket is going to get them off. Breaker bar is your friend. Use some leverage again to crack them. Once you do that, you can use a ratchet to zip them off rather quickly. Once that bracket is off, hopefully there's no rust holding this rotor in. It'll come off the hub easily. Just use caution, they're heavy. A little bit of compressed air again, get some dust and dirt, whatever it is in there, off. Even hit it with a wire brush just to give it a little once over. The new rotors What I like about these cars is that there's pins on the hubs that line up the rotor exactly where it needs to be, puts the hole for that torque screw right where it's supposed to be, makes the job a lot easier. From here on in, everything's going to go back together pretty much in the reverse order. One thing to do here before the bracket goes in is to hit these grooves, these channels, with the wire brush. Your brake pads have to kind of slide across these over time, and we want them as clean as possible. Also, a little bit of brake lube goes on there before you go back on. Next, we'll prepare the brake pads. Remember, this car only has these sensors on the passenger side, and they're going to come here, slide right into the pad with the wire facing the meat of the pad. Looks like it's not supposed to work like that, but that's how it goes. With the sensor in place, feed that wire through the opening on the back of the caliper and then snap it into the pistons. You want to take some brake lube and just get all the parts that are going to hit something that's either going to move or slide. Some of these pads have like a little material that act as dampeners, and they say you don't have to. I put some lube on there anyway, just in case. Test fit, right? It's easier for this car to put that pad out onto the other side where the bracket is, for the purpose of getting this caliper back on. And again, make sure that the tops and bottoms are lubed. With the pad seated into the bracket, go ahead and put this caliper back on. You're going to take the two pins and put them back in. Before you do, just coat them lightly with some brake lube. Remember, the caliper has to slide back and forth on that pin. Put these in by hand first before you tighten them down, just to make sure you don't risk cross-threading them. Just make sure they're on nice and tight. And then the last step over here is just to plug that wear sensor back in. Moving back around towards the front of that caliper, we're going to finish off by putting this retaining clip back in. There's two holes here on this caliper, so I like to start off with sticking the part of the clip that goes in there first. Gives you a little bit of leverage to push away from those circles, and then the little clips just kind of sit on the top of the bracket. And that's simple as that. Next, come around the back and route that cable back in. It gets kind of held in by the cap that covers the bleed screw. Then put your caps back on to keep those pins safe from the weather. And then this side is pretty much done. All that's left here is to put the wheel back on. Not going to bother showing you that because you should know how to do that. What I do want to show you is just the process beginning to end on the other side here. This took me 19 minutes to complete, from taking the wheel off to putting the wheel back on. There's no reason why you can't do this at home and save whatever money they're going to try to charge you, whether you go to the dealer or to a regular service shop. The key is to have all the right tools and have them all ready for you before you start the work. That being said, before you start brakes on this particular vehicle, these are the things you really want to have ready to go. A set of these rubber jack pads. You're going to want a Torx 25 to get that screw out. A 9mm hex head socket. Take a note, for the rear it's a 7mm. Up front, 9mm. You need your 21mm socket to get that bracket off, and then of course a breaker bar to give you the leverage you need to crack any of these bolts open. Lastly, I want to say safety first. Take whatever precautions you see fit. Eye protection. Something that's preferred, jack stands. I elected not to use them on this job because I'm kind of off to the side, and because this car has those little wells for the jack pads, I don't like resting any part of the car on the stand unless I'm going underneath it. But you take whatever precautions you see fit. By the way, I'm too lazy to go to the back where the spare tire is and get out the hanger pin that's included. But you can see here I'm having a little trouble getting the tire to line up perfectly. But if you use one of these pins, it should make that job go even faster. If you're uncertain about doing this kind of repair on your own, hopefully the video shows you just how easy it is. And of course, hopefully you get to save some money.